Well, today, thank you very much, everybody, for the participation. Today, this time, the session will be in English, and Jesus Manuel Colunga Victoria and Pedro Said Nada from law firm Basham, Ringe y Correa will be in charge of the presentation, which is about business disruption and insurance in the Mexican hospitality market. I had the chance to see the presentation, and I don't want to spoil it, but I saw it was excellent and also very extensive. So we will start with the presentation, and after that, and after the presentation, we have the questions. If we can do that if we are on time, okay? So I leave you with Jesus and Pedro with their presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you everyone for joining. And of course, the WSG network. Of course, it's nice to see the familiar faces again during these difficult times. As Daniel mentioned, we're going to discuss a little bit about the business disruption in the Mexican hospitality market, and also the responses that the insurance market and companies have had to these difficult times. So we're going to start, the next one, please, thank you, with the general hospitality landscape in Mexico. A little bit of figures on 2018 and 2019. As you can be aware, Mexico, it has a very big touristic and hospitality industry. It represents around 50.5% of the gross domestic product. Regarding employment, it has created almost 11 million direct and indirect jobs. And we have received almost 45 million international tourists, which is an increase of 30.7 million to what was observed in 2018. Regarding the Mexico position worldwide, is that it is the sixth country in international tourists receiving the world, the 15th regarding foreign earnings from hospitality, and a seventh place position regarding hotel infrastructure. So it's a really big market here in Mexico, and it contributes a lot to Mexican economy. That's almost 2 billion within the last year. Also, we have a very high rate of hotel occupancy that is around 60.3%. Thank you.
And well, just a little background, and before I say anything, thank you again, Daniel and WSG for extending this invitation. So, as Jesus was mentioning, the Mexican hospitality market is very broad. So I'm just going to complement a little bit regarding how the insurance industry faces the hospitality sector in Mexico. So first, the hospitality insurance term is not something that exists in Mexico. So in practice, there's two coverages that the insured or the hospitality sector service industry, such as hotels, restaurants, and bars offer, and it's civil liability and the property damage. Now, all legitimate hotels, and I say legitimate because if you go to rural areas in Mexico, you're going to find hundreds, if not thousands, of hotels and restaurants that are really not authorized to act as so. And I'm not also including Airbnb in this number, but 100% of legitimate hotels, restaurants, and bars have to have civil liability insurance before they get an authorization. Obviously, there's other types of insurances that they can obtain, such as theft or fire, earthquakes, and obviously business disruption, which I will cover in the next section. You're in mute.
Okay, perfect. That is the phrase of 2020, you're in mute. And also, I mean, when we talk about the hospital business disruption, of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is COVID-19 pandemic. So let us go one step behind regarding Mexico. And if we might summarize the beginning of the disruption in one picture, it will be the next one. The next slide, please. The former one.
Sorry.
Yes, that one. We have a new president, that is Andrés Manuel López Obrador in 2019. And with him, a lot of changes and policy making regarding a lot of matters, which include, of course, tourism and hospitality, was implemented. The next one, please. López Obrador is a man that he has a clear vision of what he has to accomplish, but no concrete plans on how to get there. He's kind of a politician from the 1960s, and he wants to re-centralize the power to recreate the old strong presidency and have the government establish priorities while the private sector follows. It's very similar to the Bolsonaro and also to President Trump. They have a lot of common figures that they want to impose and impose new rules of the game, where he, rather than business or what he refers to the markets, will be in charge. But that shift and that type of decision, of course, comes with a cost. AMLO decisions have created the wrong signals toward investment in Mexico, including in the hospitality area. Also, López Obrador has no viable plan from confronting a triple crisis in Mexico, which is security problems, an out-of-control pandemic, and already unfolding economic collapse. So some of the decision AMLO's government has carried out is that in first course, he canceled a new top international airport project. That project was a top-tier international airport, and he canceled it and almost with 30% of advance in the works. So that was a huge decision. I mean, it was really a decision he carried out by himself, and with no further, he jumped a lot of laws, and it was a very huge issue here in Mexico from a political and economical standpoint. Also, he has canceled certain governmental agencies promoting tourism, just as the Touristic Promotion Agency. He has shuttered down almost 21 international offices and has shifted around 300 million earmarked for promoting inbound tourism to construction of the so-called Mayan train. He has implemented austerity measures which have created impact and lack of infrastructure. And also it comes with a lack of investment in the tourist industry to make it more competitive worldwide. The next one, please.
Sorry. Okay, well, now getting into the actual business disruption insurance. What is the purpose of business disruption insurance? It's in the event that a business suffers some type of interruption, independently of the damage caused to the property or the civil liability, the purpose is to reimburse the insured party with the financial losses that it suffered from the incident. So it should be taken into account before we jump into the COVID situation that Mexico has faced several situations in the past. I mean, 2017, we had a huge earthquake in Mexico City. It was a regional event, but still it was something that it cost the insurance industry a lot. And I mean, you can go back 30 years and see several events. There was also an earthquake in 1985, or 35 years. However, the event that cost the most to the insurance industry was not this earthquake, and it hasn't been COVID so far, and I will get into that in the next section, but it was Hurricane Wilma in 2005. And that cost the insurance industry $2,290 million. So you can use that number as a reference when I discuss the situation caused by COVID. But the idea here is that the insurance industry has faced in Mexico has faced situations like this before, and they have experienced. I mean, not with the whole country, rather regionally, but still, it's something that they have experienced in handling in the past. So, and now we will go to the COVID chapter and discuss it directly.
Yes. Now that we talk about the first disruption in the hospitality area, we come to COVID. That is the second disruption. Government declared a health emergency on March 30, 2020, which established basically the suspension of non-essential activities, authorizing only those related to health matters, public safety, safety, law enforcement, financial services, for instance. Then, some times following that, on May 14, the Ministry of Health issued a decree establishing a strategy for the reopening of social, educational, and economic activities, which in first place extended the list of essential activities, but also established a system of traffic lights by regions to assess the epidemiological risk in each state, which this will be in effect until the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic is over. To give you a general background on how this works in Mexico, is that we work by stoplights. The first one is red, that basically only essential activities may be carried out. The next one is orange, that only 30% of essential and non-essential activities may be performed, but only with a 30% of its personnel. Yellow opens a little bit more, and green, all activities, including schools. Right now, in the hospitality area, the next one, please, we are in red flag and in orange flag. The red flag implies a 25% occupancy only from individuals performing essential activities. And an orange flag, which are most of the hospitality states, they comprise a 50% occupancy and the opening of common areas at 50% capacity. Notwithstanding this, we have seen certain tourism reopening, particularly in Baja California and Riviera Maya, for instance, Cancun, but there have been a lot of affectations. For instance, in the first month of 2020, there was a decrease of 61% in hotel occupancy compared to the same period of last year. Also, it has informed the closure of approximately 50,000 rooms, 2,000 restaurants, and a decrease of 40% of the airline operation. World Economic Forum has imposed a grade on Mexico as a vulnerable country due to the economic effects caused by the disruption of the tourism. Also, we're expected to a fall of 2% of the GDP and a loss of 5 million jobs. We, of course, these numbers are not that enthusiastic, and we have to be cautious about that, but not everything is bad news, as we will mention ahead in the presentation.
Sorry. Now, going back to the business interruption insurance, the question in everyone's mind is, does it cover the pandemic? Does it cover COVID-19? And the answer is no, it does not. I mean, going back to what it does, if your business is affected by, say, an earthquake, and you have a restaurant and the restaurant falls down because of an earthquake, that will be covered. But if it's shut down because of a disease, you could review certain insurance policies, and maybe you will find some that are ambiguous, and you could leave some room to interpretation. But at the end of the day, most or all of them will not. Even the Mexican Insurance Institution Association, which in Spanish is AMIS, said that no insurance company should be covering this. And I mean, it's really not only something that affects Mexico, it's something globally. It could probably bankrupt the whole insurance industry if they have to pay during a stoppage this long. I mean, in Mexico alone, it's been 4 months since we began the restrictions. And as Jesus mentioned, many businesses are still closed. We don't know when this will change, so maybe 2 months, 3 more months. Imagine the impact for the insurance industry if they have to pay business interruption for every single business that is closed in the hospitality sector during this period. Now, what is the current and expected impact? I mean, it's too early to know, and only of the insurance industry. It's too early to know, but the AMIS expects that it's going to be a loss of $300 million by the end of the year, by the end of 2020. So if you judge that next to the numbers I mentioned for Hurricane Wilma, it's really a small fraction. I mean, obviously it's going to bring losses to the insurance industry, as with every other industry, but compared to other situations for catastrophes, it's not something that's going to cost them that much. At least in the estimation of AMIS, obviously, once this is the whole pandemic is over, we will have a better idea of what the real impact was. Does this present a new business opportunities for insurance institutions? And I believe it does, at least in the way they do business. In some countries, I mean, in the U.S., you can contract an insurance policy by an app. In Mexico, you can't. But right now, we can't meet face to face. There can be gatherings. So obviously, this is expediting Mexico to catch up with the rest of the world as to how the insurance industry will do business. So I do believe it offers an opportunity. And finally, the travel insurance coverage during this pandemic, how has it responded? There's two parts, and one of them we will see in one of the following sections, which is the response that airlines give to the customers with the insurance that clients acquire with them, which is, we'll get into it later. And the other part is the actual insurance by insurance institutions. And the response by insurance institutions has been positive. There has really not been any real concerns from the National Commission for the Defense of Users of Financial Services. So, I mean, obviously, there's going to be some claims, but as with any other situation, the response by the insurance industry has been positive.
Thank you. And what are the legal and insurance aspects resulting from this business disruption? I mean, we have a lot of aspects that we may address. We try to focus on the most important ones. And the first one are the hospitality agreements. I mean, given this pandemic, there were certain direct and indirect effects that could be considered as breaches of the obligations derived from the existing agreements in the hospitality sector, such as lack of personnel, delivery delays, production stoppage, and breaches of commitments to third parties, among others. And this is where an insurance coverage comes handy. For instance, regarding the supply of goods to touristic developments and also raw materials, we have captured and breaches regarding food supply agreements, cleaning product supply agreements, among others. Also regarding the rendering and provision of certain services, such as the classic ones as the cleaning services, gardening, garbage, transportation services. And also we have breaches derived directly from the governmental restriction to occupancy. Among the most agreements that we have found kind of sensitive among the COVID-19 pandemic disruption are franchise agreements and management agreements. As you know, on franchise agreements, the quality of service, the prestige, and use of the trademark are the more important assets in the hospitality agreements that should be taken care of. We have seen franchisees adopting to the corresponding health and safety measures that are recommended by both the World Health Organization as well as by the Mexican competent authorities. And they have to make sure also its personnel take them as well. However, this compliance has an impact in the metrics and the minimum volumes applicable to this type of agreements. So the question here is, who shall bear that cost? The franchisee, the franchisor, the insurance company. Also, we have seen this with the management agreements. As you know, a management agreement commonly involves the transfer of technical knowledge necessary for the operation of a hospitality premise. That is intended to maintain quality and prestige that is commonly linked to the trademark included in the management transaction. So it is also required to maintain the same standards of safety and measure as in the franchise agreement. However, we have seen a lot of non-fulfillment of covenants in this type of management agreements for the purpose of maintaining the quality and performance of manager and owner. And again, the question that may be subject of a trial even is, who shall bear that risk? The manager, the owner, or the insurance company itself? The insurance companies have established certain, the review of the insurance policies based on certain principles, and that is the next slide. For instance, there is the pacta sunt servanda, that means that the agreements that are made must be fulfilled exactly as they agreed upon. This is one of the arguments that the insurance company is establishing, that, you know, independently of what is established in the agreement, you both agree to a specific provision. The other one is the rebus sic substantivus, which means that in contracts of successive nature of subject to a term, they can be readjusted or terminated when there are extraordinary circumstances that are impossible to foresee. And this type of principle indicates that the obligation of a contract can be modified if the circumstances in which the agreement was concluded change. So this is another optic that the insurance institution are taking care of. Is this a contract that is subject to modification in order to be amended by the parties? And finally, the classic acts of God and force majeure, that it's linked to acts that go beyond the will of the parties, which is the case of the COVID-19. So we have all these principles that are being reviewed by the insurance institution that, of course, they are based on Mexican law, but they can be applicable in all other jurisdictions. The next one.
Yeah, and I mean, something that the insured party should take into consideration when contracting with insurance institutions is they have to consider all risks, especially in the midst of a pandemic. It's very important that they don't ignore certain risks. And I mean, something that is very important to take into account, in Mexico at least, is that we don't have a very risk prevention culture. And it can be said for many other countries, but in Mexico is especially true. So in many cases, someone says, "Oh, when is this going to happen?" And you don't try to prevent it. And oh, sorry, there was some noise. You don't try to prevent it, and at the end of the day, it comes back and affects you when the situation manifests itself. So all risks should be considered. Something else is who is the beneficiary, because in many cases, for example, one particular client a couple of months ago contracted a construction company to come to Mexico and build something, and the construction company was from abroad, so the construction company acquired an insurance policy for them for the transportation and the construction of the work they were going to do here in Mexico. However, what happens if there's an issue in the construction? My client is going to have to request the counterpart to ask the insurance institution to pay out. And since the insurance was obtained in a country foreign from Mexico, they will have to go to the foreign country to do it. So it's something that needs to be taken into consideration when contracting. And finally, just confirm that the insurance is covered in the country you're acquiring it. In this example, the constructor had an insurance that is not necessarily covered in Mexico, so that presents an issue. Next. Sorry. There we go.
Thank you. Now, what are the real estate aspects of this disruption and how the insurance company handled this? As you can be aware, many hospitality facilities are operated under a lease agreement, both in the franchise agreement and also under a management agreement. Therefore, it really depends on the applicable law where the hotel or where the facility is located, because there are certain liability exclusion due to a force majeure or acts of God. In this event, the insurance company are not responding, considering that this falls within the acts of God figure, and it is an direct exclusion of liability. For instance, Mexico City, Nuevo León, Quintana Roo, Baja California Sur, which are where most of the hospitality developments are located, the tenant is prevented from using the leased property, and in this event, no rent will be cost while the impediment is there. So this is really convenient for tenant, but not for the owner of the property. So the owner of the property may go back and try to obtain a certain profit from the insurance company. Also, there are some cases in which, for instance, in Mexico, Nuevo León, Quintana Roo, Baja California Sur, that you have the right to request for the termination of the contract. So these may pose a risk to the owners of property and to persons that are involved in franchise or management structures, considering that in the event of a termination of the lease, then the whole hospitality transaction may be compromised. We envision that at the end of the year, considering all of these terms, there will be a lot of movement on the owners of hospitality transactions. We think now that because the cash is king in this type of difficult times, there will be a lot of investments, movement, and there will be also a lot of changing hands. And finally, regarding the construction agreements, regarding the hospitality premises that are being developed right now, we have seen that certain delivery terms have been delayed due to the absence of personnel, obtention of raw materials, permits, or authorization, in addition to stoppage of works. Such delay may constitute grants or terminations of the agreement.
Now, something that needs to be considered is the real estate market in Mexico. And again, going back to what I said a few minutes ago regarding the lack of risk prevention culture in Mexico, you will be surprised to know that only 7% of real property in Mexico is insured. I know it's an astonishing number. So if you go to, speaking of Airbnb that I mentioned earlier, I know that the company has certain policies when having people list their properties, but I can assure you that if they did a deep dive into the Mexican entities that individuals were listed there with properties, you would find very problematic evidence that not all of them have the proper insurance in place, or in many cases that insurance is not covering the whole risks that could manifest. Additionally, hotels, or at least legitimate hotels, do have, in many cases, the required real estate insurance, but this is more when dealing with foreign companies, unfortunately. Local companies, again, in many cases, do not envision the possible risks that could befall. I mean, in Mexico City, there will always be earthquake insurance. In Cancun, you will find hurricane insurance, but you can stop counting depending on the region, which is the next item. So if you're in Cancun, obviously it's important to cover the risks living by the sea when you contract insurance. But when you're in Mexico, you're not going to worry that much for a possible hurricane in Mexico City. So it's important to take into account the different locations of the properties when obtaining insurance. And finally, title insurance is something very, very seldom used in Mexico, but it's very important to prevent being defrauded or worse when acquiring new property. This is something that all the hospitality service providers are acquiring property in Mexico need to take into account.
Now, one of the aspects that have been more difficult for a disruption on the hospitality area is the airline travel. I mean, airlines were one of the most affected industry during this pandemic. Therefore, even though the flights are still permitted, there are certain airlines such as Aeromexico, Viva Aerobus, Volaris, and Interjet, which are taking more flexibility towards the change of itineraries, and also a lot of hygiene measures to guarantee the safety of the passengers. However, Mexico is one of the countries that has opened its airports at its totality. We have limited the flights that go abroad Mexico, but still it has an open market compared to other jurisdictions. As we mentioned in the past, we have seen certain movements, particularly regarding the Cancun area or Los Cabos, for instance. However, we need really to see more movement for the benefit of the touristic industry. Some of the highlights of the airline travel in Mexico is that we have seen Chapters 11, and so we put it this, Chapter 11 is in the air. For instance, Aeromexico filed for a Chapter 11 in the United States of America due to the negative effects caused by COVID-19, as the passenger flux decreased from in an 85 to 90%, causing a decrease in the value of the stocks almost to a 30%. So they are continuing flying and enhanced health and safety measures, respecting all ticket reservations and electronic travel vouchers, but they do have been in a Chapter 11 procedure. And the word is that Interjet, although it's not confirmed, it is rumored that Interjet is soon to be bankrupt, as the International Air Transport Association announced that such airline is suspended, causing the impossibility to fly to certain areas. So we have seen an affectation on this from the airline perspective. However, from passenger perspective, not everything is bad. We have seen a lot of these airlines to back up its customers. The next one, please.
Just to complement what Jesus was saying, really the airline industry in Mexico has a bad reputation with the customer base, and I mean it's not something new, and I think it's something worldwide. But one airline in particular, called Viva Aerobus, which is a small regional airline, did offer an insurance to their passengers, specifically tailor-made for this situation, and they cover 100% of the losses if the passenger has COVID, or if a family member has COVID, or if the passenger is going to a work function and traveling for such purposes, and the work function is canceled due to COVID. So they really used a wide net to offer to their passengers, and it's something positive. Now, the negative part, the rest of the airlines really have been in the news a lot with Profeco, which is the National Consumer Protection Agency, because all of the passengers have problems all the time with airlines. I mean, it's not something stemming from COVID. It's something that has been happening for the past 10, 15 years. And obviously, COVID accelerated the issues that passengers have with airlines, because they are not respecting changes, they are not respecting cancellations, and obviously it's something that can bring more problems to the airlines in the long run, the longer the COVID situation remains. So far, only 2 airlines are in problems, as Jesus mentioned, but others could not be so far behind if the situation continues.
Not everything is bad news. We gave all of the general guidelines of how is the Mexican hospitality disruption market. However, I mean, I think it's kind of a common situation to the ones all over the world. However, Mexico touristic industry is working towards gaining back its momentum. So there is this program for the Safe Travel Stamp, which eligible companies such as hotels, restaurants, airlines, tour operators, attractions have been able to use a stamp once the health and hygiene protocols outlined as per the World Travel and Tourism Council have been implemented. There are certain destinies, for instance, Cancun, Yucatan, Baja California Sur, Riviera Nayarit, and Jalisco is in process, but they have obtained the Safe Travel Stamp, which would gladly and hopefully will grant certain comfort to international tourists. Also, we have certain projects in Riviera Maya, Mexico City, and Riviera Nayarit. For instance, in the Riviera Maya, there's currently large hotel infrastructure projects. One of them has 8,500 rooms with an investment of almost $250 million. And the other projects have 1,000 rooms each. So there are infrastructure projects in place, and they will continue to be developed. Regarding Mexico City, this is the city with the most quarter focus on the business segment is addressed throughout Mexico. And also regarding the Riviera Nayarit, we have around 18 projects, which within the next 5 years will increase the supply of almost 6,000 rooms with an investment of over 100 billion pesos. So not everything is bad. I mean, we have seen that although the presidency of Andrés Manuel López Obrador is reluctant to provide bailouts or capitals or infrastructure to the touristic sector, we have seen that the private sector and public sector creating alliance in some point. For instance, regarding the Sargasso or the seaweed in the Riviera Maya, they have worked towards covering that issue and solving some problems. Mexico, as we have mentioned, has had experience in the past. We have a lot of economic crisis in our agenda in the past, and we honestly think that the hospitality sector will gain momentum. As we mentioned, our expectancy is that throughout this year, and particularly at the end, there will be a lot of changing hand in hospitality premises. So we can see we will envision a lot of movement during this industry. And this is a very general landscape. Of course, there are a lot of issues that will be taken care of. However, we try to address the most important ones. And of course, we remain at your disposal for any type of questions. Thank you very much on behalf of Pedro and myself.
Thank you.
And also very complete. But besides, it was very efficient because you took a lot of matters in just 30 minutes. So really, besides also it was very efficient. I don't know if you have questions. I have one question that is related to the physical damage. We know that the material damage related to COVID is not covered because all the insurance policies don't cover physical damage, only cover physical damage, and pandemics are in general excluded. But I don't know if there is a project or there is any consideration at the regulator, and they are starting to consider in Mexico the coverage for also for pandemics, because we know it is a very specific coverage that needs an approval by the regulator.
Sure. Well, I mean, the Association of Mexican Insurance Institutions has discussed it, but there's really nothing concrete at this time. So, to be honest, with the current administration we have, it's very difficult to anticipate if they will have this covered, at least in the near future. Maybe next year when there's midterm elections and if there's a change in the majority of the legal representatives in the legislative branch, we will see. But right now, I don't think there is. I mean, the president hasn't really done much to assist people without insurance, so people with insurance should probably not expect any help.
Yes, and further to that is that Mexican government basically is, you have to comply with your taxes, payment obligations, and you have to be a good citizen, is his words. But basically, there are not any type of support, so we don't expect any type of movement within this range for the next year, for at least.
Okay, excellent. Well, I don't know if the participants have any questions.
Daniel, this is Felipe. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, perfect.
Thanks. Thanks, Daniel, Jesus, and Pedro. It's been a very complete and comprehensive presentation. I would like to further explore a bit the issue that was raised by Daniel, because at the end of the day, it appears that, the industry has taken a very blank position that, there is no such a thing as business interruption for this type of risk here in Mexico. But I was wondering whether there are discussions going on during the pandemics as to, by the scholars, for example, webinars, things like that, discussing to what extent the physical damage threshold would be fulfilled by the contamination by the virus, or, for example, if there is, within the broad family of property policies, for example, in Brazil, you have very different types of property policies. Typically, the property policy is designed for small and medium-sized enterprises. They exclude pandemics. They exclude viruses. But, for example, in the other end of the spectrum, for the larger ones, for what we call for operational risk policies, which are framed as all risk policies, they typically don't do it. They typically don't provide for any exclusion for pandemics. And then it takes you to the very discussion as to how loss is defined, whether it requires a physical damage, whether you can have, for example, coverage under an impediment of access endorsements, where this endorsement has been purchased. Do you have the same level of discussion in Mexico, depending on the product? And are there claims being made by policyholders against insurers administratively? And of course, in Brazil, you have some activity, you have some claims being made, but typically you don't have any court decision yet touching upon this matter. It will take a while. We don't have much news about losses being brought, but the industry has taken the position, I mean, a very general position, as I would say it applies mostly worldwide, that while there is no coverage, the property policy in general are not designed to play out any role where there is no physical damage. But what is the status of this discussion, if any, in Mexico?
I mean, there's been discussions, and thank you for the question, Felipe. There's been discussions, of course, but nothing, again, concrete, at least not involving regulators, just between interested parties, members of the insurance sector within Mexico. So that's taken place. And as to your questions of claims, I mean, there have been no claims so far regarding the current situation. And just so you have a little context, in Mexico, before you can actually go raise a claim as an insured party, there's a commission for the defense of the financial service users. It's called Conducef. Mm-hmm. So you will have to first go to Conducef and try to get a favorable sentence from Conducef.
Oh, nice.
And that takes a while. I mean, it sounds very nice, but it's not that nice. It takes a long time and it's very bureaucratic. So once that process is completed, if you're still not satisfied, then you can begin an actual claim. So far, there's been no real claims. And with Conducef, publicly known, there's only been a couple and minor cases. So that's basically it.
Okay, thank you.
Can the discussions of the inclusion of pandemic as an issue covered depends on an endorsement that is now provided by for instance, the Lloyd's of London has that wording, but in general, in insurance policies, at least in the case of Argentina, they don't cover, and they don't cover because the risk cover does not include the pandemic. There is a list included item, pandemic is not covered. So therefore, to exclude is also difficult because you don't have a specific exclusion. So you need to mention to the policyholder that the risk is not covered. It's not that it's exclusion. It's not covered by the insurance because the insurance that he bought covers a specific risk that do not include the patient. But it is an issue that in the future might bring problems because it is not so clear.
Yeah, we have the same issue here, Daniel, because typically in Brazil, you basically segment the property policies typically by the size of the business. So you have business comprehensive policies that are meant to protect small and medium-sized companies. If you go further to bigger companies, they can purchase what we call nominated perils policies. And they are framed, well, as the name basically says, under a nominated risk structure. So they only cover what is expressly, designated as covered. But if you go one step further, for the, big complexes, big industries, they are framed in a different fashion. They basically are structured as all risks, and they say so. Well, it's an all risk policy, so whatever is not excluded, and the list of exclusions is huge, should be deemed as coverage. So that's precisely where the discussion lies here in Brazil. You have to combine, well, if they don't exclude pandemics or virus or even the contamination by the virus which attaches to the property, is that excluded? Then you have to make a construction based on the definition of laws, of physical laws, which sometimes it doesn't follow a pattern. If you go, for example, to a policy written by AXA, it's very open-ended. If you go to a policy written by SURA, it's much more closed, and it depends on, for example, an accident. So you have all sorts of language in this type of policy, and some of them may allow for more room for discussion, while others, there is no room at all. So there are some discussions going on, at least in Brazil, because of the variety of the wording of those all-risk policies, which are the biggest ones by coincidence. So, for those policies where, for example, there is a government authority endorsement saying that, well, if the government says that you have to lock your doors, then you don't even have to fulfill the requirement of physical damage, because there is a government decree determining that you should not open. Then this may allow room for coverage too. I mean, there are some nuances if you go policy by policy, at least for this this category of all risk policies. This is where we are, where we stand in Brazil in this type of discussion. But as elsewhere, the industry is basically saying that, generically, there is no coverage. It's not meant for that, but it will take a long for really the parties to understand how it will play out in court, if the parties are to litigate that in the future. We don't know it yet.
Yes, I agree. We do not have we have the position of the industry, but we don't have the position of the court. So we don't have to.
It will take long.
Yes. And I don't know if anyone has any other question for Jesus and Pedro. Well, okay. Well, Jesus and Pedro, thank you very much again. I think it was a great opportunity to learn about not only about hospitality and also about Mexico. So thank you very much.
I have one last question, Daniel. I'm sorry to interrupt. I noted that in the beginning, Jesus and Pedro mentioned that in order for you to obtain the authority, the authorization, the permits for the hotel to operate, you must prove that you have purchased civil liability insurance. So is that a mandatory requirement? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, right. Okay, because this is something that we don't have in Brazil. We have a list of mandatory insurance coverage that's for different types of activities, but not for hospitality. It's nice to know.
Just bear in mind, Felipe, that in Mexico there's a lot of illegitimate hotels, restaurants, and bars. So, I can guarantee you that the majority is falls in that branch, and they have nothing.
I see. Well, thank you again.
Well, thank you on the contrary, and we hope everyone takes an opportunity and come to the Riviera Maya or to Cancun to explore, to make a physical visit and try to see the touristic landscape in Mexico.
to
go
take
with the
all the
same
issues. Okay, well, thank you. We have to check all the issues you mentioned in this presentation. You have to be there at the Riviera Maya checking everything.
Absolutely. And thank you all again for the opportunity to give this presentation. Again, for WSG, Margaret, as always, thank you for your support on this, and we'll be available for the next webinar.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Before you leave, we have again a poll related to matters to issues for next webinar. So please complete it before leaving, so we have more or less what we think should be advisable for next webinar. I think business interruption was the matter that we had today was voted by the majority, and really, well, it gave a lot of interest, and thank you for the presentation again.
No, our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you.